How do I do it all? The Brezza gives me the power.
48 hours of group stage action in the ICC Men's Champions Trophy. We have an idea of our semi-finalists, but we have no idea of what the semi-finals look like. That'll change after England play South Africa in Karachi today and India play New Zealand in Dubai tomorrow. We build up to what's going to be a game that'll have as much discussion about South Africa and their road ahead to the semi-finals, as well as England, who are going to be on their way out and their road ahead in white ball cricket. This is Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricket for Matchday. Bright and sunny in Karachi, first and foremost. Let's tell you that after 2 days of no results in Pakistan. The toss has just taken place, and I have a full house with me as we are going to really break down the English cricket conversation. Have a look at that. Anil Kumble in readiness in Bengaluru, Aaron Finch in Lahore, and Nick Knight is going to be presented with a lot of questions today by the man who coined the word baseball, UK editor of ESPN Cricket Info, Andrew Miller joins us as well. We never get you on a day where we want to enjoy and have a good conversation. Usually it's going to be on a day where we have to discuss some serious stuff, Miller.
Bleak, isn't it? England are on their 6 defeats in a row. I think it's their worst run since 2001. I think Nick can remember that well. But yeah, it's looking bleak. It's their 3rd terrible performance in a row in ICC events, and I don't see an easy answer to it.
All right, well, why don't you try and scout some of those many books behind you and find the answers. I'm going to take 2 minutes just to talk about something big that's happened in Karachi. Well, this is going to be Jos Buttler's last game as white ball captain. That was confirmed. But Aiden Markram has attended the toss. Temba Bavuma is ruled out due to illness, as is Tony de Zorzi. So South Africa are going to be led by Markram today. Finchy, what's going on with the food in Pakistan? The South African captain's fallen ill.
Yeah, there's a couple of Aussies that have been a little bit ill as well over the last couple of days as well. And I mean, Adam Zampa yesterday was well under the weather, so it's just a part of it for travelling, isn't it? It doesn't matter what you eat, you can go anywhere in the world. And I mean, Nick's travelling around the French Riviera at the moment, so I'm sure that he'll get sick at some stage too.
Hey, Finchy, I'm not. I'm back home, sadly. I'm back home. I'm Loughborough bound now. Yeah, I mean, it's all over the place at the moment, but unfortunately, I'm now not in the French Riviera.
Yes, well, yeah, I mean, that's probably all the laughter that Nick's going to have for the next 15-20 minutes. It's a good afternoon to Anil Kumble as well.
Good afternoon,
Anil,
good afternoon,
South
everyone.
Africa. This is about South Africa, I guess, a team that is looking to consolidate top spot. One would almost assume before this game, Anil, given England's problems, that South Africa are just expected to win today.
Yes, with the kind of form that they're in, they're certainly the favourites today against England. South Africa have done well in ICC tournaments. Yes, they haven't gone on and won that trophy, but they have done consistently well over the last few years. The kind of team that they have, they're all experienced. I think in terms of their bowling attack, it's well-rounded. They have all the kinds of bowlers, and we want an experience as well in these conditions. You have a wonderful spinner if they need a second spinner when they, if at all they play India in the semi-finals, then they have the services of a Shamsi as well. Will Shamsi play today? We'll have to wait and see, just in case South Africa do play India in the semi-finals. But all in all, I think South Africa has done exceptionally well in white ball cricket.
Yep. For what it's worth, Jos Buttler's won his last toss as captain of the England team, and England are going to bat first. We'll come back to talking points regarding team news and all of that in a little while. But the big discussion on today's show, especially with what's happened in the last 48 hours, Jos Buttler announcing he will be stepping down as England's white ball captain, and just another ICC event with disappointment for a team that was champions not too long ago, that was champions of the T20 format as well. So what's gone wrong with England's white ball cricket, and what is the road ahead? What questions are there for the ECB to answer, for Brendan McCullum to answer? That's what we spent some time on. Let's just set it up and tell you it's not just overnight. The last 2 years have been poor as far as England's ODI record goes, and the numbers will back that up. A win percentage of just about 40% over the last 24 months or so. 2016 to 2021, when things transformed. They were going at 72%. There was the extraordinary 2019 World Cup win to throw into that. And this is, of course, men's ODI cricket. I'll also just, before we throw this to the panel, tell you Jos Buttler's exact words and see what we can take from it when he did announce on the eve of this game that he will be stepping down. Says he's enjoyed it, mentions that he's seen a lot of people saying it doesn't sit well with him, but he enjoyed the challenge. Obviously doesn't enjoy losing games of cricket and results. They're not going well. You do look at yourself in the mirror and say, am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? Now, Nick Knight did say in the game after the, in the show that we had after England's last game, he expected this coming. Let's take a moment, gents. And Andrew, I'm going to throw it open to you first up. What has led now, upon reflection, what has led to England's white ball cricket finding itself in this position, and what are the big questions and issues that lie ahead of the ECB in the immediate future now?
Well, the fundamental truth is they gave up on the format the moment they won it. They spent 4 years from 2015 to 2019 basically planning every single resource they had into winning that World Cup. That run from 2015, I wrote about it last night, in fact, it's almost exactly 10 years since England's debacle at Wellington in 2015, when Brendan McCullum's New Zealand absolutely destroyed them and basically proved to England that everything they did about in one-day cricket was outdated. So Owen Morgan went away, tore up the script, turned to a generation including players like Jos Buttler, Alex Hales, Jason Roy, Ben Stokes, all these guys who are hungry, young, coming through a system that actually valued white ball cricket in domestic cricket. It was 40 over cricket back then, but it was still a long form cricket that was of the white ball variety and encouraged attacking stroke play. These guys came through, were given a clean slate to give it a go. Now, all of a sudden, on the morning after that World Cup win, all the ECB's attention was on the 100, on the development of the 100. They now play the 100 in the window in the middle of the summer. The 50 over competition is relegated to a sort of development competition, which means that the best players simply don't appear. I mean, Harry Brook is being talked about as the guy who will take over or could take over as Jos Buttler's successor. He had not played a single 50 over game, domestically or otherwise, in 4 years until he made his England debut against South Africa in 2023. His last game had been May 2019, so before even the World Cup. I mean, the English 50 over game is so hollowed out that there's simply no quick fix to this. And so it's all too easy to point to the 100, and clearly loads of money has just come in from the equity sale. But that really is the crux of it, in my opinion.
Nick, carry on from there.
Well, I mean, obviously, there are a number of factors here. It's not a simple solution. I don't see it being one or two different scenarios that are going to change a whole heap. What I do feel is, I think when you're looking back at this, I think you've got to look at it pretty forensically. I mean, if you look at the ODI situation, I totally agree with Andrew. I mean, the problem here is these guys are just not playing enough. And ironically, Ben Duckett, who will have played quite a bit, and Joe Root also, who will have played quite a bit over time, have probably been the most successful players in this tournament. So you have to play 50 over cricket to understand the nuances of it. That is one issue. I agree with 100%. The second issue is a little bit more detailed, because you can't just look at the system and the schedule and the landscape of the game when you refer to T20 cricket, which of course we're doing here. We're looking at white ball cricket. England play a lot of T20 cricket. Those players play a lot, not just in England, but around the world. And therefore, your issues are slightly different, because you then can't blame it on the strategy and the structure. So I think, I would look at, I think it's been a plus that Jos has stepped down. I think I'm glad that he stepped down in the way that he's done it before this game. Bit of clarity, England moving forward. I don't think we can move away from the importance of Owen Morgan and his leadership and the way he led the side both on the field and off the field in that process, which we inevitably will refer back to. You've just put the numbers up there in terms of England's resurgence, England's focus on white ball cricket. But Owen Morgan's job and role within that, along with Trevor Bayliss, was absolutely pivotal. And I don't think, as I say, you can underestimate the importance of that. So England need to get their management structure right moving forward.
Interesting you say that. I like for Finchy and Anil also to come in on it. Finchy, you know the Australian way. It seems like one batch after the next just inherits the culture and just moves on seamlessly. There are still experienced players in this team that were part of Owen Morgan's side, part of Ben Stokes' side, and this underachieving England side can go back to even the last ODI Men's World Cup that you saw closely. Where do you stand on what you've seen?
Yeah, it's been fascinating to watch, because I think there's so many layers to it. Like Nick said, there's the skill side of it, which there's obviously no gap there. These players are unbelievably skilled. When it comes to the 50 over game, it is a totally different game when you compare it to T20. It's such a long game that you've got time to map out things. You've got time as a captain. You have to be strategic to get through your 50 overs, but also how you go about building your side. It's not just about saying, you know what, we're just going to be carefree and we're going to walk out and blast the ball out of the park. It just doesn't work like that. You have to have a squad mentality. And I think for a long time, it seems as though England, if you're in the 11, great. If you're out, there's a real disconnect there as well. And when you get to an ICC tournament, there's just the ability for the people outside the squad to be so detrimental to the performance inside. And I'm not pointing my finger at anyone. That's just my experience with teams that when you go to an ICC tournament, you have to have 15 or 16 players. They carry 17 sometimes now. But everybody has to be on the same journey, and whether I play today or I don't, you have to be around the side, and there seems to be just a disconnect in that way. Overall, you look at the system, and playing 50 over cricket is important because, like I said, it is a different game altogether to T20. It's it's just a game where you need strategy, and I think that players now they don't get a huge amount of it because it's all just one way, right? I'll play my way and I'll fit into a system, and that's it. But it's not. You have to be so calculated with how you go about things. And I like what Nick said about the Owen Morgan and Trevor Bayliss era. Morgs was a leader who was very, very direct, and he knew what he wanted, and that was it. You either fit it in or we found someone else, and I just don't see it at the moment. It seems like they're trying to pull pieces together to try and fit in to the England setup. So something does need to change, and Joss has been a great player for a long time, and I think that this will be another part of his career that you look back on and say, well, did he need that burden of captaincy? And hopefully he can get back to his best.
Okay, it's interesting. I think that point is an important one because it also then reflects upon what impressions we have as outsiders of the English team when Bazball was coined and when it became almost this liberation of England batting in any format. And suddenly now it seems like it's leading to batters not understanding the ODI game. I want to go deeper into Brendan McCullum's role and challenge. Finch even talks about player management effectively when he talks about whether the rest of the squad feels part of it. I'll come to that too. Anil, would you like to weigh in first?
Yeah, I think all three of them have certainly brought in points which are really important. From my perspective, I think from 2016 to 2019, I think England sort of dictated the template with Owen Morgan coming in and then certainly changing the look and feel of batting in ODI format. I mean, they just came in and blasted every opponent, scored 400 runs, 450 runs, 350 consistently. They were doing that. And they had the ability there and the capabilities, and the bowling, I thought, was always on the weaker side, but they got away with the kind of batting that they had. But again, if you looked at the 2019 World Cup winning team and 2023 or beyond that, the challenge has been that they don't have the quality all-rounders that they once had in a Ben Stokes. Then you had a Moeen Ali who could, again, on a tricky pitch, on a slightly slowish pitch, he could get your 10 overs. And he could support uh, Adil Rashid, and he was a quality all-rounder. And you also had Chris Wokes, who was with the new ball, who would swing the ball very different to the bowling attack that you have now. So the bowling has sort of remained, the same, but then you had a bit more variety. The batting, the other teams have caught up, and they don't have the kind of quality coming into this tournament itself, when you know that every game you need to win. It's not like a World Cup where perhaps you have you odd game you lose and then you have a chance to come back. Strategically as well, they just came with one regular spinner and expected someone like a Joe Root and Liam Livingston to sort of get them through those 10 overs. So that's going to be a challenge when you come, especially in wickets where you're playing in Pakistan. I mean, they recently had a great series in Pakistan when they scored those 700 plus runs in one test matches. So I feel a combination of all of that, and I certainly believe that the bowling is something that they need to, and of course strategically, I thought yeah, in terms of their batting lineup. And Jos Buttler was batting at that number in Owen Morgan's time. But I think in this team, he is a senior most. He can hold the innings together. He had to certainly bat up the order.
This is quite extraordinary because England are a team which we thought, like India and Australia, we keep having this conversation of they can field three different teams and still be competitive. That's the depths and resources that England, India, Australia are presumed to have in the modern game. And here in the opening comments, Nick and Andrew, we've spoken of potential deterioration in skill set for all-rounders. We've spoken of selection problems, tactical errors. So where does the buck stop? Does it stop at just Jos Buttler, who perhaps it thinks maybe it would have been different had Owen Morgan been captaining this side, if we have to speculate? Or does it extend to Brendan McCullum or even further high up the England Cricket Board? Andrew?
Well, I think it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, to go back to your point about the coining of Bazball, seeing as I came up with the word, I might as well explain the rationale. I mean,
yeah.
The point was back then, it was clear when Brendan McCullum was appointed, he had not coached a red ball team before in his life. And therefore, it was obvious that something different was about to happen. And so I came up with the word. But the fact the word caught on was proof that everyone was thinking the same thing, that they're about to do something really quite remarkable here. And the reason we knew what was going to happen was they were built around a generational core of great England players. You had Ben Stokes, had Joe Root, Johnny Bairstow, who hadn't had his great times in Test cricket, but was a clear favourite in a World Cup winning white ball player who had the potential. And then Anderson and Broad, who were on their last hurrah, just going gung-ho and wanted to go out on a high. So it was obvious that they had the five core players who didn't have anything to lose, and so they threw everything at it. And because they didn't have anything to lose, they were able to bring through the younger players, allow them to fail. You had guys like Zach Crawley famously had his rough times early on, but it didn't matter because the senior guys were doing enough to carry the message. That's not working in the white ball team. And we also mentioned Trevor Bayliss there. And Trevor Bayliss was a huge influence in England's white ball team back in the day. But you have to remember that he was also the test coach, and the test team almost went to seed in that same era. And so I feel like it's a contrast now. Brendan McCullum's now come in, I think, in the test coach. He's taking over the white ball team, but it's almost as though I feel as though he's come into that looking at guys like Jamie Smith and Harry Brook with the Ashes in mind, and the fast bowlers with the Ashes in mind, thinking, you know what, the legacy of these guys is going to be determined by what happens in Australia. Right now, all I want is to have all my players under one umbrella. It doesn't really matter what happens in white ball cricket in the short term, as long as all the players are getting the same message from one head coach.
Whatever either of you would want to just jump in on that. If you have questions, I mean, I've got a few, but Nick, Anil?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of England's greatest challenges moving forward is player personnel. I mean, when you get to a World Cup, it's the culmination of a building process. It was clear in the 2019 World Cup win. England were the best side. England were number one side in the world. England won a lot of games of cricket. England knew how to win games. England knew when it got tight who was going to play well in the middle, who was going to be a pivotal role in the middle, role identification, all that sort of cliched words, but actually they play out. What England have got to work out, and of course the focus was during that period on white ball cricket, but Brendan's come in, and by the way, I think he's a terrific coach and I think he's doing a really good job. But what he's got to work out is he's brought some of these test players in now to play one-day cricket. Now, if you're going to be successful in the next T20 World Cup and the next ODI World Cup, 50-over World Cup, you have to realistically go into it with a whole heap of wins, full of confidence, everybody knowing what their role to do is in that. If you're playing test match cricket and one-day cricket, that is a very difficult balance to get because inevitably you're going to be slightly hamstrung by wanting to rest certain players at certain times. When you look at that period between 2015, 2016, 2019, a lot of that was one-day specialists. A lot of it was focused on one-day cricket. The test match side were operating in a different venue, and it had a very individualistic feel to it. That is what I think England have got to really get their heads around. Which direction do they want to go in that? Because if they are going to essentially play a lot of their test match players, who they will believe is their best players, there's not always going to play a whole heap of bilateral series. They're not always going to be playing together as a group when they come to an ICC major trophy. And I see that as being pretty important, actually. So I think that is one major issue that Rob Key, Brendan McCullum, the management team are going to have to work out who their best players are and who they're going to invest their best time in to make this work in the next big Champions Trophy, World Cups, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that is
And
going
that'll
to
be the
be.
challenge, Ronak,
Yes,
as
Anil,
well.
please.
Just to add to that, I mean, that's going to be the challenge for not just England, but every team who want to be a part of the World Cup in ODI format as well. Because there's hardly any ODI cricket, bilateral cricket that happens nowadays. It's mostly T20, and the focus is on that. And leading up to a World Cup, maybe the last 1 year, you may play a few one-dayers, not like before, where a team going into a World Cup, you could perhaps say that, okay, 20 matches for the last 20, 25 matches, this same squad has been together. So each one knows when a team is in trouble, who's the one guy who's going to get you out of that. So in that sense, I think each team, every team in world cricket is going to face that kind of a situation with especially in the ODI format.
Let's just talk this tournament one more time and just trying to think, Finchi, of Australia seem to have done just fine without major players missing, especially with their bowling. We saw that game between Australia and England. And I'm only just trying to think over here, could they have just been better tactically in this tournament? Is it as bad as I'm sure the media will now bring up and as a result of the results? Or have they just got one tournament or this tournament wrong tactically, maybe in terms of selection? I know Nick said previously that maybe Atkinson or Saqib Mahmood should have played. From what you've seen of this team, is it as bad as we're almost making it sound?
Well, it's such a one-dimensional attack when you look at it. It's pace on with not a real amount of tricks to it. So straight away, as a batter, once you get in against an attack that's got express pace, your comfort levels are really high because it's just the ability to score all around the ground. There's not variety in it. And I mean, if you add Gus Atkinson or Saqib Mahmood into that side, then maybe you do have a little bit of a different look. And I think overall, Rain Ahmed coming into the side just provides another option. A lot of teams do go in with 7 batters and 4 bowlers and then rely on all-rounders. You look at Australia, they're relying on Glenn Maxwell and Matt Short and Marnus Labuschagne and Travis Head to get 10 overs or more out of them. So overall, I mean, it's a solid 11 that they're picking, but there's just no variety in it whatsoever. And I mean, it's easy to look back on it and say, well, they're being beaten, so this is why. I mean, when you look at it at the start of the tournament, are people saying, "Oh, this is a great attack. Look what we're bringing to Pakistan. Where the conditions are flat, we need a point of difference with pace." Probably not. You say, "Well, that looks good on paper," but then you see the reality of it, and you have to find other ways to navigate 50 overs. And I think that's where, in the first game, Steve Smith out-captained Jos Buttler because he navigated his fifth bowler expertly well. Yes, Australia still went for 350, but that was probably par on that wicket that they played. Steve Smith, he bowled one over here, one over here, one over here, and just didn't allow the batters to settle into lining up the fifth bowler. Whereas England, they wheeled out the same stuff time and time again. So from a tactical point of view, I think that it needs a refresh as well. So the pressure that it takes off Jos will be great for him because he can then free up and bat in whichever position the new captain decides. But overall, they were lacking with variety in their squad. They were almost forced into a corner in how they select their side, and when it doesn't go well, it goes horribly wrong really quick.
But that then, I guess, speaks also to, you almost empathize a little with Jos Buttler because he wasn't the only man picking the squad. And Nick, you make the point, they perhaps have got their selections wrong too. Now, let's look forward. Likely Harry Brook is going to have to do the job. Has he been put in, is he in a position that he might likely succeed with everything that's happened before, with he himself being so young in his international career? And when Brendan McCullum talks about greater support or systemic support, what would you like that to be going forward? Nick?
Yeah. Okay. Well, in answer to your question, I think Harry Brook is the right choice if they go down that route. I saw him actually captain England in an under-19 World Cup. I think he's done a fair bit of captaincy. I like his sort of free-spirited style. I think that will suit it pretty well with Brendan McCullum. I think they'll work together very well. the inevitable danger with this is that he's one of the best players in the side, and are you saddling him with a bit extra responsibility, and how will he cope with that? A little bit in a similar way to you might say happened with Jos Buttler. That's the other problem, by the way, we haven't talked about, is that Jos Buttler, England's best player, hasn't really been contributing majorly in the last couple of years. And if you're going to do really well in big tournaments and you need your best player to be playing somewhere near the best. So I think that will happen moving forward when he's not the captain. But to go back to Harry Brook, I think he'll work well with Brendan McCullum. I think it's going to take time. I think we've got to be a little bit patient with Harry and Brendan and that new look side that they might pick, or whatever they're going to do in terms of strategy. But I think the most important thing that Harry has to do, along with Brendan McCullum, is to create an identity that the team really believe in. And I go back to this tournament, actually. I watched very closely how England have played, and all the wording in the press and the media interviews. It's like, well, we're going to go out and entertain. We've got these fast bowlers. We're going to play front foot cricket. We're really going to push on here and take the game to a new level and all this sort of stuff. Fine, that's fine. But when actually it came to the match situations, did they do that? I mean, they started off against Australia. They got 350, and as Finchy said, 350 probably should have been 375. At times, they were a little bit pedestrian there. So for all the talk about being aggressive and Bazball, etc., when it really came down to it, their identity didn't quite play out. And then you go back to the Afghanistan game, and a similar thing happened. I mean, we were talking in the mid-innings break. England had to fly out the traps there, really show kind of ultra Bazball tactics and get ahead of the game before the middle overs came about. England didn't really do that. Again, they were pretty pedestrian. So my answer is really, they're talking one way, but actually when it comes to it, are they playing that out? And I think that is the new plan for Harry Brook, Brendan McCullum, Rob Key. When they look forward, the identity they want to create, can they play that out in major situations? And I think they will. And I think that go back to Owen Morgan. That is exactly what he did. Risk failure, be fearless. It's going to take time, but play out the actual identity which you really want to play out.
Miller, final word with you. I think we're all assuming it's going to be Harry Brook. Is it? And when we talk about Morgan, I think there's no doubt he may not have been the best player in the team, but he was certainly the best leader or tactical brain in the team. Is Harry Brook that, or can he potentially grow into that, or are there other names?
Well, there aren't really any other names. I mean, Liam Livingstone has captained England recently, but my colleague Matt Roller just was crunching the numbers the other day. It turns out that he's batted 8 times in ICC events for 84 runs. Only 3 players for England players have scored fewer runs at ICC events. Was Archer, Broad, and Anderson. So that's not a great starting point for him. There's Sam Curran, who's another guy who talked up to the captain, but it looks like his face doesn't fit. I mean, Brendan McCullum is clearly very much of the 90-mile-an-hour bowler. Again, I think this is largely to do with the Ashes and honing the squad he wants to take down under and making sure the messaging is right. So Sam Curran's a little bit on the outside for that. And beyond that, there's really no one. I mean, Adil Rashid is a senior player, but he's 37, but he's probably the only player of that 2019 generation who is a regular and still performing at the requisite level. I mean, Joe Root, we can't go back to him, but I mean, he scored his first century in 6 years, which again tells you something about where England have put their ODI fortunes. His last century was in the World Cup in 2019. I mean, these are the systemic problems that will not be solved in a hurry. But again, it comes back to that fundamental point that, the original Bazball project was built on solid foundations of generational greats. This team, this Bazball project in the white ball format is being built on Jos Buttler, who's going to be 37 come the next World Cup, and very little else of great substance beneath him. It's a very worrying situation for England.
Right. It is a worrying situation for England. Is that where we'd leave it? Was there anything else that Finchy and Anil would like to add? I know Finchy in his heart has loved this conversation. He used the word fascinating. He used the word fascinating to set it up. And then he gave us a very, very honest and unbiased view. Anything else, gents?
No, it's not about enjoying it. It's not about enjoying it, because when England play, it is beautiful to watch when they're playing well. They take the game on. They're prepared to do things that me as a I wasn't able to do it, but other teams, they're not prepared to push the boat out that far. But like Nick said, they're talking one way and not delivering in another. Yeah. And the one thing that I would just add on to it all is there enough self-reflection inside that dressing room.
Yep.
And it's hard to know unless you're there, because a lot of the time, even in my time playing cricket for Australia, you say one thing publicly, but then you're doing a different thing behind the scenes, and everything is quite calculated in how you go about things. But it just seems that the messaging, again, there's a disconnect there, that there's no reflection on, well, you know what, we could have done this better. Oh, the other team shouldn't have won. We played better than them. Like, there's so much of that coming out consistently that it just doesn't make sense. So I'll just question whether there is enough internal chat about, you know what can we do better, or is it all just looking through rose-coloured glasses and no, it doesn't matter. You know what, we lost today, but we'll win tomorrow, and we'll move on. So it's an interesting time for England, but it's great when they're playing well because it's so entertaining to watch.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Is there anyone who wants to actually add something on that or answer it potentially? Sometimes the messaging tends to be the subject of a lot of debate, and whether that's actually at odds with what the team's thinking. Nick, anything?
I would say actually,
yeah,
generally across England's men's and women's teams at the moment, there's an awful lot of talk about inspire and entertain. This has been the big downfall of the women's team of late. You know, they were talking up the inspire and entertain mantra at the Women's World Cup, and then the Ashes, and it all fell apart. Again, I agree with Finchy there. There's a lot of messaging, a lot of repositioning of English cricket at the moment, trying to attract a new audience, and all the other things that go into participation, all the existential threats to the game in England. But sometimes you just got to get down and win, haven't you? And even if you have to win ugly and win dirty sometimes, I think the public can get behind that if you feel as though the players are doing their damnedest to turn a corner, which, to be honest, across men's and women's at the moment, it may not be the case.
You know how you inspire the next generation? You win. That's what inspires the next generation, because they have something to look up to. They see their team winning, whether it's men's or women's, and they're inspired by that. They're not inspired by the way that people play. They're inspired by wins and losses.
Yeah, and just on that, Ronak, the reason that I didn't pick England to move on to the semi-finals was just that, because leading up to this tournament, they had not a single win. And then, I heard reports where players have sort of come out and said, look, come Champions Trophy, we'll switch on. It doesn't happen that way in cricket. I think, you need to be consistently sort of doing well, and then the team needs to be going through every situation, coming out of a tough situation and winning those matches, irrespective of what the championship is. If you don't do that consistently, then come Champions Trophy or a World Cup, you can't just turn things on.
All right. Well, gentlemen, I think that was brilliant. Thank you so much for it. Maybe we can send a clip of this to the ECB. I'm sure Andrew will facilitate that if they're still taking his calls and giving him, and giving him his accreditation. I was just going to say, right. Let's confirm teams, shall we? Just before we wrap things up on the pre-show. Game's underway. Phil Salt's having some fun. He's off with a couple of boundaries. England, remember, batting first in what's a really important game to still decide the fate of the semi-finals and what order the teams finish in. Tristan Stubbs will play his first game. Temba Bavuma is out ill, so too is Tony de Zorzi. Heinrich Klaassen is back. That is good news and big news for South Africa. Did miss the opening game against Afghanistan with injury, and then there was the washout against Australia. No other changes to the bowling lineup, so still no Tabraiz Shamshi. Let's have a look at England's team. Saqib Mahmood, first game for him. Sonogas Atkinson and Mark Wood misses out. Right, let's just get a very quick reaction on both teams. Nick Knight, you on England first.
Well, I'm pleased that Saqib Mahmood is playing. I'm a big fan, actually, not just in T20 cricket, not just in ODI cricket. I think he's had a tough time with the ball in terms of injuries, so I'm glad that he's back. I still say the same thing, Ronak, as I've said throughout the tournament. I think it's very hard for Jos Buttler when he's just got 4 genuine bowling options. I know Finchy was saying Australia do it that way, but I just don't feel that England are at their best. When I look at a team, when the team comes up, the first section of the team I go to is the bowling unit. I look, the batting unit often looks after itself. I look at the bowling unit. Are they balanced? Are they well balanced for the conditions that they're going to be playing in? And often, too often, when I've looked at that side in these subcontinental conditions, I've looked at that bowling unit and thought it's going to be really hard here. It's going to be really hard to get control of the game unless you just have one of those days where you can knock over a top order and be consistent. Australia did it. Spencer Johnson and Adam Zampa did it yesterday. They knocked 30 overs ticked over. They got a wicket. They broke up the partnership. They were able to finish the game. England haven't been able to do that, even with their pace X factor and Adil Rashid in the middle. So again, I look at what happens after 25, 30 overs, and that side, for me, that bowling unit has struggled.
All right. Well, Phil Salt's struggles have continued. By the time Nick's finished that point, Salt has already been dismissed. Finchy, one quick comment from you on the South African team. Klaasen back is big news. And Tristan Stubbs, he doesn't make this team. He's quite a fine player. And it's a good headache to have if South Africa gets some runs from these players. They are, of course, expected to make it to the semi-finals.
Yeah, he's a super talent, Tristan Stubbs. But like you said, Klaasen, he's the one that I think everybody's been waiting for him to come back into the side. He just provides such a threat wherever you play around the world, whether it's conditions that favour pace or favour spin. He's got answers to a lot of the questions that every single team in the world asks. So great to see him back in the side, and especially going deep into this tournament, they'll need him at his very best.
All right. You know what? I might feel like an idiot for asking all this, but after everything we've discussed, does anyone back England to win today? No. All right. That's it. Thank you very much. Andrew Miller, thank you so much for that. That was your special appearance on our show. Finchy, you are off to Dubai. I wish you safe travels. We'll see you again very soon. Anil and Nick, we'll look forward to your company at the end of the England innings. So, do join us then on Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricket for Match 10. What's the final Group B game in the Champions Trophy? So we'll see you at the end of the England innings.
How do I do it all? The Brezza gives me the power.